is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
Looking. He's under the gun. He's fired. He throws. It is.
It is that time of year, one when much of the country is freezing and dreaming of the summer and the beaches and girls in bikinis. And for Sports Illustrated, that means the swimsuit issue. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Past Our Prime podcast. Scott Johnston here along with Bill Mahoney and Mark Hoffman. And guys, a couple of beauties on the cover of this one from January 19th, 1976. Yvette and Yvonne Sylvander from Sweden, yeah?
Mm-hmm. So Sweden, isn't that Trading Places?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly, Jamie Lee. You know, we're at the age where the beach means being slathered in sunscreen and sand all over the place, but there was a time when there was nothing better than a day at the beach. So let me ask you both, and as three fair-haired guys, is there a time where either of you got severely sunburned?
Oh. Remember, at least when I was a kid, back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was no such thing as sunscreen. You had copper tone. Right. That's all you had. And the one kid that wore the white stuff on his nose was always the weird kid, so you weren't going to do that. So yes, I'd go to the beach. I'd be on the beach, and God knows I wasn't smart, obviously. I'd keep my shirt off. I'd go back freaking fried.
Right.
I mean, I was like one of those lobsters from the tank they used to have. Oh, all the time.
Yeah, same here. Memorial Day weekend was an annual tradition where I would go down to my sister's house. She had a place in Huntington Beach, and I'd go there Friday. And then on Saturday, I would get blistered sunburned. Sunday, I would try to recover. And then Monday, I would drive home.
That sounds like a blast when you get that sunburn all over your body. And every time it touches,
anything.
Anything. It's like, oh, wait.
You put a shirt on real gently.
Yep.
Don't catch that. Ah.
I will say, though, I know Mark's got his. The one time, and I think I mentioned this to Mark the other day, I did get tan 1 year. We at 17, 18, me and a bunch of friends went to go see the off-road races. I was drunk from Friday to Sunday, and I had my shirt off. I came home completely tan. I have no idea what went on in those 3 days, but I did get a nice tan. That's the only time in my life I've ever been tan.
Oh, you don't remember that girl putting the sunscreen all over you?
I don't. I remember nothing. I missed the girl that was dancing naked on top of one of the RVs. They said, Bill, she's there. I went the wrong way. She's there. I went the wrong way. All I knew is I came home and I was tan. Ever since then, before and after, I'm always burned.
Yeah. Mark?
Well, there's so many stories of me just getting totally fried. But the one that stands out in my mind is I'm 25 years old, 1985. I go to Hawaii to meet my two friends, also named Mark, and we hang out for a week in Hawaii. And the final day, because I remember it was a Saturday, because I always had to fly home Saturday night because I couldn't miss producing a Sunday sports final. Anyway, we go snorkeling, and I have nothing on my back. And I just get super fried on my back. And then I have to take a plane that night, a red eye, back to LA. And I couldn't even lean back against the seat. It hurt so much. But back then, you just didn't care, you know. And years later, I guess I paid the price.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, man, that sounds brutal. And the three Marks in Hawaii, my goodness.
The Marx brothers.
That's very, very good.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, you said fried, and back in my day, fried meant something different.
I know it did.
Yeah.
Mark's got the big,
Doing shrooms, are you?
Fried, dude. Get me some munchies.
Well, you can be sunburned and fried at the same time. You know?
That's true. I think I've done that.
Ask Jeff Spigoli.
Oh, and the lady that was responsible for all this, a lady by the name of Julie Campbell. And in the letter from publisher, Mark, we kind of get to know who Julie Campbell is.
In this picture, she's a young lady, you know, and it's the real reason why I think the swimsuit issue took off, because she was so good with the models and setting up the issues, and she did it for so long for Sports Illustrated. And this is still kind of in the infancy stage. I would say this is like when the swimsuit issue is sort of like just getting into their teen years, maybe, so they're just getting started to what it's going to become.
And I remember the story. I think it was Curry who told us this. I don't recall for sure, but Curry Kirkpatrick. And he was talking about how Christie Brinkley one year, and she was, becoming Christie Brinkley, super model. And, Campbell was like, we have to meet at X, and this is the plan, and blah, blah. And Christie showed up, I think, with her husband, Billy Joel, and children, and was like, oh, they're coming too, and blah, blah, blah. And Julie was like, no, they're not. And she was like, okay, well, then I'm not going. And she was like, okay, we'll see you next year. Goodbye. And she was like, no, I maybe. And she was like, nope, we're good. Thank you so much.
Wow. I remember that. I forgot about that story.
Right?
Yeah. Wow.
Just came back to me, but she was the Chuck Knoll of Sports Illustrated, man. No nonsense with her.
And Curry loved her.
Yeah.
Curry loved her, said she was just the best.
Yeah. Died a few years ago. I want to say like 2022, and she was almost 100.
Wow.
Lived a long life. So, scorecard. Bill, what do you got?
I'm going to talk about the Minnesota Fighting Saints. Remember their owners? Yes. The Minnesota Fighting Saints of the WHA. Well, their owners, they can't meet payroll, so supporters have taken up a collection for the team and even suggested that local churches also pitch in money to help the on-ice Saints make some money. Well, that all sounds well and good. They just didn't tell the two thieves that climbed through a window in the club's box office and stole $250 from the little meager till. Man, they say it when it rains, it pours. Yeah, true in Minnesota and true for the Fighting Saints.
They stole from the Saints?
They did. The Saints came marching in.
That's a one-way ticket to hell, isn't it?
It is.
Not very saintly.
Yes.
Mark.
Well, I got their talk of the San Francisco Giants might actually move to Toronto. That means the Dodgers wouldn't have beaten the Blue Jays in the World Series. They wouldn't have played the Blue Jays in the World Series. And I think the Giants were seriously considering this move in 1976, but they didn't go ahead and do it, fortunately for San Francisco fans. Horace Stonen had agreed to sell the team to a Canadian group that was led by Labatt Breweries for $13.25 million. They were going to play at Exhibition Stadium as the Toronto Giants. However, the San Francisco mayor at the time, George Moscone, who I believe was the mayor who got shot and killed by Harvey...
Dan White.
By Dan White, along with Harvey Milk a few years later. Anyway, he intervened. He got a court injunction and then allowed a group led by Bob Lorry to buy the team. And they stayed in San Francisco. But the good news for Toronto was a year later, they got an expansion team, the Blue Jays.
Wasn't there a pool player, Moscone?
Willie Moscone.
Willie Moscone.
Okay.
The Giants did not draw well at Candlestick for years and years, and even into the 80s, they were rumored to be going to Tampa St. Pete, and they were pretty much done until the A's intervened and saved the Giants by giving up the San Jose market, which was in the Oakland territory. They gave it to the Giants. And that opened up their TV market more. And then, not knowing this, it became part of Silicon Valley. So now the Giants have all this. So the A's, part of the reason the A's moved is they went back to the Giants a few years ago and said, hey, we gave this to you X amount of years ago to save you. We'd like to have it back. And the Giants were like, yeah, no chance. And
well, it's interesting because in this article, they say if the Giants did move to Toronto, they listed how many times franchises have moved in the history of the game, like teams that have never moved, teams that have moved once, twice, And it's interesting because since this article came out, I think the Montreal Expos going to Washington and now the A's on their move, I think those are the only teams that have moved since then, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Back when quotes were bold,
they said it. The Spaceman Mark.
Yes, our former guest is, and they said it, which is really surprising because Bill Lee never said anything controversial.
No.
Anyway, he's talking about a current visit to mainland China. He says, now I'll get to see the real Big Red Machine.
That is so true. Boy, he nailed that one.
Yeah.
I got a couple. Speaking of the Big Red Machine, Pete Rose on his speed on the bases. I'm not a great runner. I'm no Joe Morgan, but I'm not bad for a white guy. Pete did not have a problem saying those kind of things back in the day. And I got another one from Ken Shipp, New York Jets coach, on his days as assistant coach and babysitter to players at the University of Miami. They were looking out at a hurricane, and one kid decided he wanted to get up and close. Shipp says there was no way I was going out in that storm after him. Besides, he wasn't even a regular. Tell it like it is.
Exactly. See you later, fourth stringer.
Speaking of Billy, tell me about H.K. Cootie Reeves.
Cootie, I love the name Cootie because that's what all the girls had when I was a kid. He's the Hoax Bluff, Alabama high school coach after his team was trounced 53-0 by Hazelwood in the state championship. If we hadn't given up those first 4 touchdowns, it might have been different.
Sure might have.
Scott, don't we do that all the time when we're watching certain games? We'll go, man, you hit 4 grand slams here. You're back in the game.
Yes. 10 more 3-pointers, and the Clippers are within 1 of the Celtics.
You know what? If we just scored more points than them, we would have won the game.
Yes.
Right. Well, what did Tomlin say the other night when they asked him about the field goal? He said, well, if my aunt had male parts, she'd be my uncle, right? So that's one of those.
Did he really say that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
This was détente Philly style. Mark, the Flyers and the Soviets are playing, and the Soviets had their way with most of the NHL teams, but not as much with the Stanley Cup champion Flyers.
Yeah, I believe they sent 2 teams. I think they sent like a Moscow team and then the Red Army Club. And the Red Army Club had beaten the Rangers like 7-3. And then I think the Soviet team beat the Penguins 7-4. So they did really well. But this game against the Flyers was different. This time it was the Flyers that did a little bit of the dominating.
Yeah, this match became a symbol of the Cold War tension from back then, turning the idea of détente into open hostility on the ice. I mean, we know the Broad Street Bullies, their style of play back then was to take no prisoners, and they did that against the Soviets. Relentless physical play to try to neutralize the Soviets, who I wouldn't say were, I would say they were kind of a finesse team, speed and passing, but it really ticked them off. And Billy, a violent hit on, how do you say it? Valery
Karmalov, Valery Karmalov. Yeah, that was
led the Soviet team to walk off the ice for a bit.
Yep. Yeah, Ed Van Impe took Karmalov out, but that wasn't the first time that had happened. In 1972, Bobby Clark slashed the same guy's ankle. So there was a history between these teams. And when you talk about hatred, Clark sums it up with this. He really hated those bastards, is what he said about the Soviets. There was no love lost from between these teams, but, the Flyers did come out ahead on them.
Man, I mean, that is like a little kid's dream, right? To have the enemy Soviets come, and you probably hate the Flyers if you're any other NHL fan, but for one night you're like, oh yeah, you're getting Dave Schultz and the Flyers tonight, Soviets.
Yeah, the coach of the Soviets called the Flyers a bunch of animals.
Yes, animal style.
Yeah, they did not want to play the way they played, and they didn't, but they lost.
Next up, we have the blather before the battle, kind of a look ahead to the Super Bowl between the Steelers and the Cowboys, and we'll look ahead to next week when we have Jack Ham, 4-time Super Bowl champion of the Steelers, and a Hall of Fame linebacker and one of the greatest to ever play. He's on the 75th and 100th NFL anniversary teams. Just one of the all-time greats. For Super Bowl 10, Cowboys and Steelers, Mark.
Yeah, and I think it's a battle of the defenses if you think of it, because not only is Steel Curtain defense elite, but the Cowboys defense was damn good that year too. I think they'd given up only one touchdown in the 2 playoff games heading into the Super Bowl. And relatively speaking, that Super Bowl was a lower scoring game. Less than 40 points were scored in it. So even though, Staubach and Lynn Swan and Bradshaw get a lot of the attention, defense has really dictated those teams.
Absolutely. And this is one of the settings that had quite an impression on young Mark Hoffman, because they did a lot of filming for a film for this game, did they not?
Oh, that's right. I mentioned use that in trivia. Bloody Sunday, the terrorist one where the Goodyear blimp was going to crash into the Super Bowl, and they let him shoot. I think during the game, before the game, halftime. I specifically remember a shot of Robert Shaw running down the steps at the Orange Bowl, like looking for something, like a terrorist or something. And could you imagine today in the Super Bowl? Oh yeah, just go run around, do whatever you want. I don't care.
Yeah.
Well, the thought of you renting a blimp into a Super Bowl, geez, you can go get a hot dog before you leave.
Yeah, no, that blimp's getting awfully close there.
Here it goes. Well, should we go or watch the second quarter?
When you're number 7, you try harder. U.S. Figure Skating Nationals followed a familiar pattern. The reigning champion, Dorothy Hamill, retained her title despite a flawed free skate, but the real drama came from the battle to make the Olympic team, especially among younger challengers. A young gal, just 15, Linda Fratiani, delivering a thrilling performance with difficult triple jumps and electrifying the crowd. She would go on to become, I think, a U.S. champion not once, but maybe even 2 times. So,
and she got a silver medal, I think, in 1980.
That's right. So we're talking about some of the greatest U.S. Olympic skaters, Billy, of all time, Linda Fratiani and Dorothy Hamill.
Yeah, that's funny what they said about Hamill. They said they're in the U.S. national championships, and someone said, hey, Hamill could lose. And then one cynic said, yeah, sure, if she falls down 5 times or disappears in a blinding flash. She won.
Yeah.
She was great.
NCAA playoffs, football dilemmas, bowls or playoffs. I can't believe 50 years ago they were talking about this, but the NCAA delegates debated creating a college football playoff to crown an official national champion, a move critics say would undermine bowl games. Bingo! Boy, they nailed that one. I mean, yes, we now get a national champion that is not controversial really anymore, but they certainly have undermined. I mean, think about it. The winners of the Rose Bowl are now playing in the Peach Bowl.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mark, 50 years ago, I did not know that this went back this far.
I know, isn't that crazy? And everyone poo-pooed the playoffs. And we've gone now from 4 to 12, and I bet you it'll be 16 in the next year or two.
Well, can I mention, to me, they screwed it up. The Rose Bowl was always a big week celebration. You went to Disneyland, you went to the Beef Bowl. They've eliminated that now.
Yeah.
There's no more Disneyland. There's no more Beef Bowl. The teams come in a day or so early and just play the game and leave. So I don't know if taking away the Rose Bowl tradition was what should have come out of having a playoff system.
Yeah. And soon, and you have players now who don't play in some bowl games. Who was the receiver for SC that didn't play this year?
Yeah. But there also, some people are saying that if you move the bowls to the beginning of the year, you could actually get all the players playing and better ratings.
Yeah, that's probably true, and they do play a lot of big name games in the beginning of the season. It doesn't seem, I'm sure in 30 years, a generation would grow up and that would be the norm for us. But there was something, and I know once again, I sound like a get off my lawn, but there was something about New Year's Day.
No question.
40 years ago, that was a phenomenally great day for college football, and it's not anymore.
Nope.
No, this year they only had 3 bowl games on New Year's Day. That's it.
And wasn't it the playoffs?
Right. We're all playoff oriented.
Yeah, it wasn't like the Weed Eater Bowl.
And then January 1st used to be the last of the bowls, but now bowls are played on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, depending on how the day it breaks during the day. Like if New Year's Day is on a Thursday, they'll put a bowl game on a Saturday or Sunday after the New Year's Day bowl. Those are supposed to be the end of it, you know?
Yep. And the national championship's on the 19th.
I don't know. I don't know if if the goal is to make it better, I'm not sure they've achieved that.
Nope.
Taking a shine to resort with new glitter, Yvonne and Yvette Sylvander, Swedish twins on the cover of SI, and they are in Baja, Mexico, along with Cheryl Tiegs, Christie Brinkley, and others who I would come to know and love. Mark, you remember this one pretty well.
I sure do. You know, as a teenager, you waited. Usually it was late January that the swimsuit issue would come out, and you would wait with bated breath for the mailman to deliver that issue. And I specifically remember this one very, very well. How old was I? 16 at the time? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's when you remember everything.
Yeah. Can't remember yesterday, but I can sure remember 50 years ago.
That's when people used to say, I just get it for the articles.
Yes.
No, you don't.
Yeah. Yes. For 1 week, Sports Illustrated had the Playboy answer, right? I just read it for the sports.
Yeah. I don't even care about the pictures.
I don't think now, or for a while there, they just dispensed with, there were no other articles. You opened it up and there was Kathy Ireland, and that was it for the whole issue.
Right.
Yeah. Now, we have talked about our love for Sports Illustrated, and heck, that's why we do a weekly show about it and the influence it had on our generation and on us. But there is another side to these old issues of SI in the world of sports collectibles. Mark Humphries grew up in La Cañada, California, just up the street from us, where his sports education began the old-fashioned way. Hand-me-down copies of Sports Illustrated from his next-door neighbor. It was 1977. The pages were bent, and Mark was hooked. He went on to Stanford, where he somehow managed to earn degrees in engineering and history, helping pay tuition the truly noble way by investing in Roger Clemens rookie cards. Yes, while most of us were eating ramen, Mark was diversifying his portfolio with Topps, Fleer, and Donruss baseball cards. That early success turned him into a sports card savant and landed him an investment banking job at Morgan Stanley in New York City, because of course it did. After a decade of suits, spreadsheets, and skyscrapers, Mark did what any sane person would do. He went back to sports collectibles. In 2002, he introduced the first grading and encapsulation system for Sports Illustrated, because apparently magazines deserve slabs too. And in 2011, he acquired thepit.com, an online trading platform for collectibles, officially completing his transformation into a hobby heavyweight. And since August of 25, Mark has been sharing his wisdom monthly as a contributor to PSA Magazine, proving that a kid with secondhand magazines can still grow up to change the collectibles world. That PSA Magazine is where I first got wind of Mark. It was an article on Eddie Matthews and the very first issue of Sports Illustrated, and we'll get to that in just a second. But Mark, hey, thanks for joining us on the Past Our Prime podcast.
Thanks, Scott. I'm delighted to be here and to learn about your podcast, because going through sports history 50 years ago, week by week, is fascinating. I think it's terrific. It's great because you can actually interview and speak with many of the people that were on the covers and in the stories. And that's what I love is sports history. I've been studying it for decades, and Sports Illustrated was a national treasure. Today, it's a bit of a shadow of what it was back then, but these were truly the glory days in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And I'm really looking forward to exploring that history with you, hopefully many times going forward.
Yeah, so let's go back to the beginning, shall we? Why you wrote that article about Eddie Matthews and the 1954 debut article of Sports Illustrated. Why is that debut considered the most important single issue in American sports journalism history?
Well, because it established a new standard for excellence, and Sports Illustrated became not only the official record of sports in the United States and to a lesser degree throughout the world. But it became just an outstanding magazine, one of the great American magazines, period. And started careers of many outstanding writers, and also elevated sports photography to a new level. Now, I want to give credit to Michael McCambridge, who wrote an outstanding history of Sports Illustrated, because I read this book almost 30 years ago. It came out in 1997. And I revisited it when I wanted to write about Sports Illustrated and explore it and share it in social media. And McCambridge did the heavy lifting 28 years ago to talk with the writers and editors, some of whom, of course, are now gone. So he deserves a lot of credit. He's still around writing new books. The most interesting thing about early Sports Illustrated, and you'll quickly notice this if you just look at the covers from the 1950s, is that it didn't have. It took a while for it to gain traction in terms of finding its direction. In the beginning, it was certainly aimed at the upper class, and not surprisingly, because the people at Time Magazine said, well, we want to sell high-end items through the advertisers in our magazine. And therefore, when you look at copies of Sports Illustrated in 1950s, again, the magazine launched in August 1954, you see covers for dog shows and yachting and a lot of golf, hunting, and just birds, fishing. And it's very different, of course, from the Sports Illustrated of the later 60s and 70s and up to the present, where it's dominated by the major team sports that became so prevalent across television. And Sports Illustrated, under Andre Laguerre, who became the managing editor in 1960, figured out that its sweet spot would be in complementing the growth of television in the United States. And for many years, television and Sports Illustrated had a very complementary relationship. People would see the games on TV, but they'd want to learn more about the players and teams, and they'd get that through Sports Illustrated. Remember, in 1950, almost no one had a TV, and in 1960, almost everyone had a TV in the United States. And then color TV expanded through the 1960s, and Sports Illustrated was there to guide that transformation.
I loved how you mentioned the advertising, because one of the things Mark does pretty frequently on the show is talk about the advertisements in the 70s. We're talking 74, 75, 76 when we are doing our shows, and they're almost all cigarettes, cool old cars, alcohol. As I realized by then, 20 years later, maybe even earlier, that their audience wasn't yachters and dog shows, but was middle America, wasn't it?
Yeah. Henry Luce, the founder of Time Magazine, who directed his top executives to start a sports magazine, he early on realized from feedback about Sports Illustrated that some people were saying, this is for the martini set. What about the pretzels and beer gang? And I think it's clear that Sports Illustrated in the 1960s figured it out, that there was a much larger marketplace and that there was a huge middle class. They weren't the upper class, but they were they were people that had plenty of spending power. I mean, America dominated, of course, the world economy in the couple decades after World War II. And so the leisure class had expanded to the middle, to ordinary wage earners, and Sports Illustrated was there to entertain them and to show them things they could buy to improve their lives and entertain them. So it eventually became the magazine, I think, of both the Martini set because it was sophisticated, but also the beer and pretzels gang, as Henry Luce had the vision to realize it needed to be.
You know, I will say though, we're doing these in the mid 70s. I've learned so much about fishing, hunting, and bridge than I'll ever need to know in the rest of my whole life. But, you know, it's amazing, but it's good stuff. But for you, Mark, when did you first start seeing Sports Illustrated as a historical artifact instead of just a magazine that you read and maybe throw away?
Well, as I mentioned, I started getting it in 1977 when I was 10 years old. And I think it was from the experience of collecting and speculating in baseball cards that I realized that these magazines were collectible. Why were they collectible? Because they were significant. And they were significant because they represent sports history. They represent the interpretation of these events and people that are so core to American popular culture. And I looked at these magazines when 20 years later in the mid 90s and thought, my gosh, these are collectibles in themselves because they have all the characteristics of a great collectible. They're significant. They are aesthetically pleasing. You have the greatest sports photographers in the country hunting down the best photographs and putting them on the cover. In terms of value, they had one of the great characteristics of any collectible. If someone tries to sell you something new and says, this is going to be a collector's item or has collector's item written across the top, you pretty much know that it won't be, because that's a signal that you're supposed to take it and save it. The things that are valuable a generation or two later are the things that no one thought would be worth anything, like comic books in the 1930s and 40s, like baseball cards in the 1950s and 60s, when we have so many stories of mothers, throwing the collections away when the son went off to college or to the military, as my grandmother apparently did with my father's Batman collection, which included Batman #1. So I like to say that the greatest collectibles, in terms of, the greatest collectibles need to be rare also. They can't just be significant and beautiful, because if they're just significant and beautiful and they're easily obtainable, they don't have that lure of the chase and the difficulty. The great collectibles are not necessarily rare when they were produced. In fact, it's better if they were widely available. Ubiquity. They were ubiquitous at the time. They were everywhere, but they were also ephemeral. People threw them away. They went into paper drives and just tossed away. And that makes them rare later on, which creates the collector interest and the value. And that's certainly true with Sports Illustrated, because the most valuable issues of Sports Illustrated by far are what we call newsstand editions. It's just what it sounds like. Collectors don't like these subscription issues because, first of all, there's an ugly subscription label attached to them. And that mars the cover image, which is what collectors are most interested in. Now, sometimes those labels can be removed depending on the era, but they almost always leave an ugly scar behind of the glue residue. Since 1996, the labels have been printed right on the magazine, so that's not even an option. But the other thing that collectors love about the newsstand editions, those bought individually, are that they're much rarer, of course, because the overwhelming majority of Sports Illustrated, right from the beginning, were in subscriptions. And therefore, the newsstand issues are far rarer. In addition to which, most of the ones saved, as you might imagine, were also subscription issues. I mean, not just in number, but in percentage, because those are the people who loved Sports Illustrated the most, the ones who decided to subscribe. The person who bought an occasional issue on the newsstand was actually more likely to throw them away. And that's why the most important, significant, and collectible Sports Illustrated issues are newsstand issues of the greatest superstars, and we've already had a sale at $126,000 for a Michael Jordan first cover with the Bulls in 1984. It's the December 10th, 1984 issue, where he's rising up among Milwaukee Bucks defenders towards the basket. And the headline is "A Star is Born." And it's a fabulous collectible. My guess is that one day there will be $1 million sale of a copy of that issue in mint condition. And it will be it will continue to gain status alongside Michael Jordan's thousands of different trading cards.
Well, I know as a kid, I had two choices. I could collect Sports Illustrateds or Sporting Newses. I went with the Sporting News. I still have them, but they don't seem to have the same resale value as maybe a Sports Illustrated. But when someone comes to you and you see something that is so rare, how exciting is that for you to tell someone this is worth something and you have kept it in pristine condition?
It's really fabulous because of the aspects that I've mentioned, that most of them were tossed away, and if they weren't tossed away, they weren't handled carefully. And so it's almost a miracle when something appears, even from the 70s, really, that's in close to pristine shape. And collectors, if you're familiar with any collectible category, coins or stamps, trading cards, comic books, certainly the item is the first characteristic, but the condition is the second. And it's because of bragging rights, right? People don't want to just say, I have Action Comics #1 with the first Superman appearance. Ideally, they want to say, I have the finest Action Comics #1, which launched the superhero genre. And I mention this because just in the last week, and I don't follow comics closely, but I hear the big headlines. The finest Action Comics #1 from 1938 with Superman on the cover sold for $15 million, breaking a record of $9 million for another Superman comic book. And now, how do we know it's the finest one? Well, so because this market is so heavily dependent on condition and the bragging rights that go around distinguishing one Action Comics #1 from another, there is a company that has graded and encapsulated these in a very professional manner for about 30 years. It's called CGC. No, 35 years. They're based in Florida. And the comic books was the initial publications market. There's tremendous interest in that. Over 15 years ago, I went to CGC and said, hey, I've tried to do the grading and encapsulation on my own, but it's difficult to launch this as an individual. Are you guys interested in grading and encapsulating magazines? And they said yes. And so I helped them get that started. And the result is magazines of this type. This is a Bo Jackson magazine, and this is encapsulated and graded by CGC, which is Collectors Guarantee Corporation based in Florida. They've been grading magazines since 2008, 2009, and comic books all the way back to 1991. So in a very rich country, which we live in, people, they want the bragging rights. They want to say, I have Michael Jordan on his first Chicago Bulls cover appearance, and I have one of 5 that are graded at the highest level. And the difference is tremendous. That highest level of 9.8, like I said, the sale has been publicly recorded at $126,000. You can buy that same magazine in a subscription issue any day on eBay in a middle condition, like a 6.0. It's a 10-point scale, as you might guess, for say $300. So the difference between $300 for an average subscription copy and $126,000 for the finest known examples, that's what bragging rights are worth.
So I'm trying to understand here. So when you try to determine the value of something, if you're comparing a Sports Illustrated, say, to a Life magazine or a Time magazine or a People magazine, how do they differentiate it? And then how do you differentiate it between, say, the value of a Sports Illustrated magazine to a baseball card or to some other form of collectible?
Well, the market always determines value. These independent grading companies determine condition, and they do a good job of that. There's a company in Southern California called PSA, Professional Sports Card Authenticator. That's the company for whom, which publishes a magazine, and that I've been writing for about 8 months. And they assign a grade based on a 1 to 10 scale, and they place it in a tamper evident plastic case. And there's other companies that do this as well. And as I've mentioned, CGC from Florida does the same thing with comics and magazines. So that's the critical element to protect, authenticate, and grade the item. And then the market determines what the value is. eBay has been the dominant player in the market for all secondary items since that platform became popular 30 years ago. And eBay does a really good job of allowing people to buy, sell, and trade their items in a public marketplace with good transparency and solid safeguards. So if you want to know what something's worth, you can pretty much just put it up for auction on eBay. And if it's a mainstream item, you'll tend to get a reasonable market price for it. And because these markets have become reasonably large and sophisticated, there are other websites that track all the sales on eBay and from other auction companies, and can tell you the average of the last 10 sales and lay out the various price spectrums across different conditions. And I use those services every day.
How do the swimsuit issues compare in value to other Sports Illustrateds? Are they worth more, the same, or it just depends? Like maybe the very first swimsuit issue in '64.
So it may surprise you to learn that they're not that popular. They're not that popular among the serious collectors, most of whom are really focused on athletes and sports history. And they do have value. I don't want to knock them down too far. The early ones from the 1960s have sold in nice condition for close. The first issue from 1964 with the woman wearing a white bikini. I believe that magazine has sold for as much as $7,000 or $8,000 in tippy top condition. Now, an average copy again is going to sell for maybe $200 or $300, and only if it's a newsstand edition. A subscription issue would be less than $100. I don't know of any collectors who are building graded runs. We call a run being if you try to collect like every swimsuit edition in a graded encapsulated fashion. There will be some when this category gets bigger, but right now there's much more interest in Michael Jordan. He had 50 covers on Sports Illustrated. Cassius Clay and Muhammad Ali, who was the record holder for the most covers before Jordan, and guys like Jack Nicklaus, Larry Bird. That's what collectors want the most. The other problem with the swimsuit issues in terms of value and collectability is that people saved them. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. They weren't as ephemeral because people thought they would be collectible, and so they saved them. So the supply demand, there's more supply and maybe only the same demand. I own quite a few of the swimsuit issues from the early years in top shape. From my boyhood, I remember Cheryl Tiegs. As I mentioned, I got these secondhand from my neighbor, who was a Stanford grad named Wick Stevens, and he later wrote a recommendation for me and helped me get into Stanford. So I'm indebted to him two ways. But Wicks's wife would usually hand the Sports Illustrated magazines to my mom, and Vivian Stevens, when the issue with Cheryl Tiegs in the fishnet came out in like 77 or 78 and was showing a little more skin, she had to ask my mom whether this was appropriate for me to view at that time. And my mom said it was okay. So
yay,
a lot of moms had that.
Great
question.
mom.
Well, you mentioned, and it's funny, Mark, you mentioned that the swimsuit issues aren't as popular. And that's funny because for 9-year-old Scott, swimsuit issues weren't all that popular, but 19-year-old Scott really
Yes. Yes.
Funny how that works. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question about magazines versus cards, because cards, you look at the card, you look at the front, you look at the back. Of course, I'm being, elementary, but that's it. For a magazine, how important is the rest of the magazine? I imagine the cover has to be pristine, but let's say page 60, there's a smudge or there's a little stain on page in the faces in the crowd. Like, does the whole magazine need to be graded at a high level?
That's a great question. The answer is yes, but the pages are much less important. And CGC, which again has set the standards for grading publications, starting with comic books for over 30 years, they have an entire book, like a 300-page book, describing all their grading standards and giving guidelines as to how much a crease on an interior page, for example, matters relative to a crease on the front cover or the back cover. And as you might guess, a crease on page 30 is a lot less important than a crease on the cover, especially the front cover. So for collectors, to answer a different shade of this question, they only care about the cover. They don't care in terms of the contents, I'm saying. Like, now, many great athletes have been in faces in the crowd. And I imagine you've spoken about this in the past. Jack Nicklaus and Emmett Smith and Don Mattingly, Tiger Woods, many others. Collectors might note that, but in general, since they're focused on ultimately a slabbed item where you can only see the front and the back, they really care almost exclusively about which athlete is on the front cover and what he's doing and what's the significance of that event.
You know, I was looking, Mark, at that cover you brought up with the one with Bo Jackson on it that's really nicely framed and covered. So does that make it even more valuable thinking, man, Sports Illustrated predicted Joe Dudek should win, or they wanted him to win, and it was Bo Jackson, instead of doing the obvious and saying, Bo's got it. So does that type of magazine like, hey, they got it wrong, so look at this?
You might think so, but no, the opposite is true. The collector of Bo Jackson wants something that celebrates Bo Jackson. And there is an issue later on that celebrates Bo Jackson properly. This is from 1987. It says, "Which way, Bo?" And this is the best Sports Illustrated cover of Bo Jackson, showing that he was both a sensational running back with the Raiders and a spectacular, if not great, because he had spectacular tools with the Royals, and so was an amazing baseball player as well. The collector, imagine that the typical collector is interested in this, wants to put these on the wall of their man cave. If you're, and the most ardent Bo Jackson fans would probably be an Auburn alum, right? And so does the Auburn alum want to put up a cover where Sports Illustrated is saying Joe Dudek of New Hampshire's Plymouth State should win the Heisman over Bo? No, they'd rather have one celebrating his greatness. So I think that the market would value that magazine more highly if it had shown Bo in his glory, setting SEC rushing records, rather than making the silly case that Rick Riley did, that Dudek should win the Heisman.
Wow, now if I could just get the ones where Bo Jackson turned me down for so many interviews, I got that going for me. That's just memory, though. How much does autographs on the cover of the magazine help, or does it hinder the resale value?
Yeah, quite a bit. The Bo Jackson that I showed you, the first one, the Joe Dudek issue, is actually signed. And I bought it that way from the auction house. There are many collectors of Sports Illustrated that focus on autographed issues. I don't. The vast majority of my collection is unsigned issues. But the autograph will substantially increase the magazine's value. I'll show it to you again. So I bought this just last month. I paid $250 for it. The autograph is right here. And as I mentioned, this is a subscription issue. The label has been carefully removed down here so that you can barely see the evidence of it. It's a good label removal job. But nevertheless, it is still a subscription issue, and collectors would ideally want the newsstand issue. I paid $250 for this. If it had been a newsstand edition, it might well have gone for $1,000. Without the autograph, this magazine probably would not even be deemed worthy of encapsulation and would be a $10 item. So in this case, the autograph's probably adding $200 to the value.
I went on Heritage a while back and I bought a series of things. I think I got a Goose Gossage rookie card and a Deion Sanders $5 baseball. But they sent me a certificate of authenticity. If let's say a magazine or whatever you're trying to sell is autographed, do you have to show that to someone to say, yeah, it's actually authentic? It's not just someone that I know could match his signature or her signature.
Well, that will certainly is likely to get you a higher value. Yeah, autographs that the vast majority of autographs that are offered at auction through reputable houses come along with certificates of authenticity. Now, one of the reasons that I don't collect, I generally don't collect autographed items, is that I don't put that much stock in the certificates of authenticity, okay? You know, because most of those certificates are simply an expert saying, we think this is real. And I mean, anyone can realize that it shouldn't be that difficult to replicate a signature, and many fraudsters try to do that. However, there is I don't want to malign the experts, because these people do good work and they identify a lot of fake autographs, but they're not going to be 100% correct or successful in trying to weed out the fakes. The more the proven way to get a real autograph, of course, is to have it witnessed and cataloged as a in-person autograph that is witnessed by the authentication company. And CGC does that as well. And everyone should have a lot more confidence in those autographs. I have a few Sports Illustrated that have been signed by Wade Boggs and Ozzie Smith and others, where the certificate at the top, this part up here, it says signed, not this one, but the print up here in that case would say signed by Wade Boggs on July 27th, 2024. This one alternatively just says Bo Jackson authenticated autograph, which means that their expert has looked at this autograph and deemed it to be authentic when compared with other Bo Jackson autographs. But obviously, that's not as secure a guarantee as if CGC, a respected company doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, says, we saw this item being signed, which is the other type of autograph guarantee.
Can the value be affected too by the type of collectible? Like, for instance, there's so many magazines, there's so many baseball cards. But I remember as a kid, I had these, like, they were almost like coins. They're like metal things of baseball players. Would something like that have more value because it's more rare? People don't see that.
That you may be referring to a Topps chewing gum product, because they experimented with various other media besides cardboard rectangles. Mm-hmm. But they're not as popular in general. Collectors are almost by definition a conservative group in almost every way. They're literally conserving the past, and they get very tied to specific formats. And so they love the traditional sized cardboard trading cards. And the size has remained unchanged since 1957. It was slightly larger pre-1957. And since 57, Topps reduced their size, and all the other manufacturers that have tried since, Donruss, Fleer, Upper Deck, and others, have adopted that same exact size. And that's what collectors like. Other items have been tried, rectangular metal ingots and coins and felt patches, and none of them has ever developed the following that just the traditional cardboard has for collectors.
We're talking with Mark Humphries, an expert in the world of sports collectibles. We're talking specifically about Sports Illustrated for the most part. And we're going to go back to that first issue again, Mark, in 1954. And one of the things I loved about Sports Illustrated back then was you have Eddie Matthews on the cover, and then inside there's an article about Rocky Marciano, and then there's an article about Poison Ivy. and it really goes to show you, in all seriousness, that they didn't quite know what they had yet in 1954. They didn't know what they were. Did the public kind of demand what they became, or did they figure it out on their own and kind of ditch the health and poison ivy aspects and go more sports? And did that help Sports Illustrated become what it was?
Yeah. The answer is yes. They started out, as you've implied, thinking that a balance between spectator and participant sports was where they should be. And within 10 years, and under a legendary managing editor, Andre Laguerre, figured out that what they really should be is 90% spectator sports and maybe 10% participant advice. And and I go back to television. It became the complement to TV, to give people more color and more understanding of what they were watching. And with all the preview issues, you can imagine, as you're excited about the football championship game coming up, or how your team's going to do in the Pac-10 or the SEC, and you want to read about it. You don't want, you're so eager for those games to watch on TV that you want to learn more about it and learn who the players are in advance. And they were expert at doing that for many decades. And they still try today, although as reduced to a monthly, they have a lot less bandwidth in doing that. And Sports Illustrated was the armchair complement to the television sports viewer for many decades, and I still use it. I'm still a subscriber, and I use it to learn about the upcoming NFL and NBA seasons, along with other resources.
You know, Mark, this will be, yeah, you've probably answered this, but I just want to make sure for futures, with all of the Sports Illustrated, Sporting News, most magazines have now gone to mainly online. How much more valuable will issues like SI be in the future?
Well, the market will have to determine that. I'm making my wager that people are going to want these tangible reminders of compelling stories. That to me is what Sports Illustrated is. But I always try to keep an open mind. Will people still want them 100 years from now? I think so, because they're always going to be fabulous display items. But of course, there are other collectibles that have had less promising experiences. For example, we don't know a lot of people who collect stamps anymore. Stamp collecting was one of my father's hobbies, and it was extremely popular with people of the FDR era. FDR himself was a stamp collector, and I think as a result of that, a lot of people picked up stamp collecting. But even when I was at Collectors Universe, I worked with them as Vice President Corporate Development 20 years ago. They're the parent company of PSA. Stamp collectors were already known as geezers with tweezers. Mm-hmm. And so 20 years later, I'm not sure that I'm pretty confident that the group of stamp collectors has not expanded much. I mean, stamps aren't even used. Stamps are used very little anymore. Generally, of course, with the advent of email. So we never know exactly what the future is going to hold. my expectation is that people are going to continue to love and be passionate about sports, and that they're going to be passionate about sports history. I think it's interesting to note that people are more passionate about sports history, in my opinion, than they are passionate about entertainment history, about the history of movies and TV, or even about music history. For example, the number of statues that exist around the United States, almost every major league stadium has statues of their great players. I used to live in San Francisco, and there's a magnificent statue of Willie Mays right out in front of the stadium. And there are additional statues of Orlando Cepeda and Juan Marichal with his high kick at another entrance. And I believe there's a Willie McCovey statue there. And that's typical of most major league stadiums. This sports history is one of these fabulous elements of American cultural pop history that is handed down through families, the experiences of fathers taking sons and daughters to games, teaching them about the past, touring them past the statues of Mays, McCovey, Marichal, and the others. And in that way, it has a sense of continuity that leads people to want to explore it, to collect the cards, to read the books, to collect the Sports Illustrated magazines. And as a history buff generally, and a lover of pop culture, I just think that's fabulous, and it's unique. I mean, Shirley Temple was a huge icon, 80 years ago, I guess. But are there people who collect Shirley Temple stuff now? There may be a few, but there are not nearly as many as who collect Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb memorabilia. So I think sports stands out from other entertainment vehicles and media in a remarkable way.
It's trivia time, past our prime, but still in our prime. Questions rolling like a tumbleweed.
You were just talking about pulp culture, and I was going to ask you, when there's a non-athlete on the cover, when it's more like a celeb type, does that increase the value, not increase the value, have really no effect on it? Or it depends on who the pulp culture icon is?
The collectors are mostly interested in the athletes. There have been many figures from entertainment, movies, TV, and music who have appeared on Sports Illustrated covers, but none comes to mind as being a special target of the core collector base. They have provided some of the most ridiculous and laughable covers. There's one from 1964 with Shirley MacLaine running with a football, and a bunch of Notre Dame football players in the background, all in a pile. And the caption is Shirley MacLaine runs 99 yards against Notre Dame. It was some compliment to a long forgotten movie that Ms. MacLaine was in. And I mentioned it in my Bo Jackson article as my intro, saying that you would assume that this is the most embarrassing and disrespectful college football cover ever, but it's not. It's actually the Bo Jackson issue, which said that Joe Dudek should win the Heisman Trophy in 1985.
So anyway, here's your trivia question, okay? True or false, okay, in these pulp cultures. You did mention Shirley MacLaine, but true or false? Bob Hope, Steve McQueen, okay, Stephen Colbert, and a character from Sesame Street have all been on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Well, the only one I'm not I'm going to say true. And I know the Big Bird was on the cover with Mark Fidrich. And I know Bob Hope was in a Cleveland Indians uniform one year. I don't remember the caption on that. And Steve McQueen is seen riding a motorcycle on the cover. The Stephen Colbert must have been more recently, but I assume that happened. Who was Colbert pictured with?
It's a 2009 issue, and it's just Save the Olympics, and his nation saved the Olympics.
Okay.
Like an Olympic themed stuff. Thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Big Bird I remember because I grew up a Tigers fan, and him and Mark Fidrich on the cover together. But I guess Sports Illustrated is kind of like ESPN. When it started, it was trying to find its niche. And ESPN at the beginning wasn't doing all these major sports. They were doing small things, and then they grew into this entity.
ESPN has played a fascinating role with Sports Illustrated as a rival and as a competitor. If Sports Illustrated could have seen the future in the late 80s when ESPN emerged, they probably should have tried to buy ESPN or combine with it in some way, because ultimately by the early 90s even, the managing editor of Sports Illustrated is quoted in Michael McCambridge's book when asked about Sports Illustrated's greatest competitor. He said immediately SportsCenter. Okay, because people were now getting their information about sports primarily from TV, just as today they get it primarily from the internet, and all that pulled obviously readers away from the print version of Sports Illustrated. SI, created its own digital presence, but it never had the same impact and doesn't today. So TV brought Sports Illustrated to prominence, but then ironically, it also carried the seeds of Sports Illustrated's diminishment over time.
Mark, I just one final one from me. I had a friend or a guy I knew in Seattle, and he had a big closet, and all they were filled with were bobbleheads. Are bobbleheads a big deal nowadays, or is that just sort of a passing fancy?
Oh, there are passionate collectors of bobbleheads, and because they are given away at many sporting events, I think they continue in the collector consciousness. In terms of big values, it's not on the same scale. I'm not an expert in this, but I'm not aware of any bobblehead selling for $10,000. Has one sold for $1,000? Possibly. I just don't know.
So you're saying my Peter Borges bobblehead is useless?
I won't say that. If it makes you happy, then
exactly.
Hey, my last one for you, Mark, is do you have a favorite Sports Illustrated issue? Doesn't necessarily have to be one you own. Could be one that you want to own. But is there one that sticks out for you?
Well, the greatest Sports Illustrated issue in terms of a collectible is the one I've mentioned previously, the Michael Jordan, A Star is Born from December 1984. But that's too easy an answer. What's a great one that I love? I think Tiger Woods' first cover from 1996, when he had just entered when he had just joined the Pro Tour, is really significant to me because I was living in New York City at the time, and I'd heard stories about this amazing golfer who was at Stanford. And I was expecting Sports Illustrated to write about him at some point, but I didn't necessarily expect him to be on the cover. And in October 1996, they had a fabulous cover of Head and Shoulders action photo of Tiger finishing a swing, and Tiger exclamation point in big letters across the front. And it said, in 2 months as a pro, he has transformed an entire sport. And they were just spot on. That was still when Sports Illustrated would tell you what was going to be the most significant stories going forward. And with Tiger, they caught that very early. So I love that cover. And then they also made him Sportsman of the Year just 2 months later in December with a second cover. And I think the article inside was by Gary Smith, one of SI's most acclaimed writers. And that article also was prophetic because his theme was, will Tiger win or will the machine win? The machine, according to Smith, was the hype and celebrity environment that follows someone so gifted and in such a position of celebrity as Tiger Woods. And he went with this theme through maybe a 12-page story showing what Tiger Woods' life was like as just a young man exploding onto the pro golf scene. And for a while, Tiger won. And unfortunately, all the allures of celebrity, of course, led him into some controversial and difficult situations later on. And that article became more prophetic. And Tiger came out okay in the end, and learned a lot of lessons, and is arguably the greatest golfer in history, regardless of the issues in his personal life. But when you go back and read that article today, it's incredibly prophetic, and in discussing the pressures, challenges, temptations of celebrity.
From secondhand Sports Illustrated's in La Cañada, thank you, Wick Stevens. To reshaping the collectibles world, Mark Humphries, you prove that loving the past can change the future. So I want to thank you so much for your insight and the history lesson on SI and the world of sports collecting. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I really enjoyed sharing my passion for this magazine.
All right, let's talk a little college hoops. An awakening in the ACC. Carl Tacey, Wake Forest coach, unusually low-key, avoids smoking and drinking, and emphasizes team unity through breakfast gatherings, picnics, and study requirements. And Mark, for the Demon Deacons, it seems to be working.
It is. They're off to a great start that year. And they had just beaten, undefeated Maryland, 96-93. They had beaten 3 ACC rivals in the space of 8 days. They were on a roll. But I think Bill will say that the team got the SI curse. They didn't finish the year.
No,
they
started 11-1, finished 17-10. They finished 6-9.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say in their defense is the next year they went 22-8 and got all the way to the Elite Eight.
Oh, so this was just a precursor to their greatness.
Yeah, it is. And think about it. Wake Forest, think about Wake Forest, okay? Think of the players that have come and played basketball there. Chris Paul, Tim Duncan.
Yeah.
Rodney Rogers,
yeah.
Muggsy Bogues, and of course, actor Mark Blucas. We'll say, who the hell is that? But anyway, he's an
Wasn't there a big Randolph or something on that team, on the Tim Duncan teams? Did you say that, Mark?
No, I said Rodney Rogers.
Yeah, Rodney, he just died.
Muggsy Bogues, man.
Yeah.
Muggsy had a long career. Chris Paul.
But just think, though, Chris Paul and Tim Duncan. I mean, come on.
Just that alone, yeah.
No question. Yeah, that was kind of the beginning, I guess, of them becoming a relevant ACC basketball team. I assume they're still in the ACC. Billy, you were thinking of Randolph Childress, I think.
That's it. Thank you.
Yep.
I was thinking of Randolph Scott because
Randolph Childress was really good with Tim Duncan.
Yeah, I of course didn't know that. I had to look it up.
Yeah, I didn't. I got Randolph.
One other thing, Indiana wins close games over Michigan and Northwestern. They are 12-0, and I don't remember how many exactly wins they finished with, but I know the the season ends with an O. No losses for that Hoosiers team. A Tiger at the plate. Steve Kemp, outfielder from USC, the first overall pick in the MLB winter free agent draft by
the Detroit Tigers.
That's right. Known as a powerful hitter, Kemp surpassed Fredlin's college hitting records at SC with a .435 batting average, 13 home runs, 67 RBIs in his senior year. Billy, they thought Steve Kemp was going to be better than the reigning AL MVP and Rookie of the Year, Fred Lynn.
They did, and he started off his career strong. He had a few good years off the top, but Lynn, over the long haul, proved to be just the better player, and he played quite a bit longer than Kemp as well. But Kemp had some good years in Detroit. I loved him and Jason Thompson when they were there.
You know, the thing I remember about Steve Kemp, and Kemp had a decent career, but the thing I remember about Steve Kemp was that he got traded to the Chicago White Sox for Chet Lemon.
That's right.
And there was an episode of Magnum PI where they refer to that trade, and they said, I can't believe the Tigers, I think it was a detective who was a recurring character. He says to Magnum PI, I can't believe the Tigers traded Steve Kemp. And for Chet Lemon, but Chet Lemon was a key part of that 84 World Series title team. So,
well, I can't believe anyone ever traded Jay Buhner.
Yeah, Jay Buhner was traded twice. When did he go from the Pirates to the Yankees or whatever it was?
Gotta have Phelps. My people kept saying, gotta have Phelps.
Okay. And Jay Buhner is just like he's a hero in Seattle.
Yeah. Wonderful.
For the record,
Billy, start us off with one of the underrated great heavyweights of that era, Kenny Norton.
Well, he defeated Pedro Lovell by a 5th-round TKO and would finish his career with a record of 42-7-1. Here's some of the guys that he lost to. Cooney, Ali twice, Foreman, Holmes, Shavers, and Jose Luis Garcia. He never fought Frazier. Isn't that weird? But you know why they never fought? Because they were close friends. They shared the same legendary trainer, Eddie Futch, and their career timelines didn't line up for a fight. But also, neither of the guys wanted to hurt each other unless there was massive money involved. I never knew that him and Frazier were that close, so that's why they didn't fight.
No, had no idea. Love that stuff. Love learning those things.
Me too.
What about those Braves, Mark?
Well, you know, they got a new owner, the Braves. And I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Ted Turner. That's right. Ted Turner is buying the Atlanta Braves. And how much is he spending for the Braves in 1976? Well, at that time, that was a ton of money. It was about $10 to $12 million. You can't even get a utility infielder for $10 to $12 million today.
No, they are valued now just over $3 billion.
So I think that was a good move on his part. What do you think?
Yeah. I wonder what he sold them for.
Let's find out.
I got one for you, Mark. Ansel Hoffman. No relation. 91 years old. He was the boxing manager of heavyweight champion Max Baer. And Mark, Max Baer was the father of?
Max Baer Jr., Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies.
Exactly. See, it's called the circle of life, people.
Real people, real stories. Faces in the crowd.
Nancy Thompson, Mark, introduce us to Nancy Thompson.
Well, the reason why I picked Nancy Thompson does not necessarily deal with what she accomplished, which was great. She was 16. She set 8 state winning records in swimming, you know, in the 200 and 400 meter individual medley, a bunch of swimming stuff, freestyle. She's a very good swimmer. The thing that struck out to me is that she's from Idaho Falls, Idaho, and I know Idaho. If it was not for my wife, I would have never been to Idaho, and I would have been to New Mexico one time. But because of my wife, I have been to New Mexico 50 to 100 times, and I've been to Idaho 25 to 50 times. So Idaho Falls is about, an hour north of Pocatello, where Idaho State University is. It's they have an airport there. It's sometimes easier to fly in there to get to Pocatello than it is to fly into Salt Lake City and make that drive. It's all on the I-15. So if you get in your car, you head to the I-15. I sound like I'm doing a segment from SNL's The Californians.
Yes.
And then you drive down the 210 to the 15, and you take the 15 north, and you just keep going. You're in Pocatello, you're in Blackfoot, you're in Idaho Falls. You're in Salt Lake City too.
I'm glad I know that. That's better than the Ken Norton Frazier.
That's your geography lesson for
there's
today.
There's nothing better.
I might edit out the Norton thing.
You should. What? I actually may fly there tonight and just do that route.
You could just drive on the 15, get up to Vegas for a day or so, then go to St. George, then go to Salt Lake City. You can work your way all the way up to Montana.
I cannot wait for that.
Wow, that is screw ways.
Yes.
That's right. You can stop in Pocatello, go to an Idaho State basketball game, go Bengals.
Bill.
Faces in the crowd is John Tima for me. Tima, he led the Brecksville Broadview Heights High School team to the Ohio State Championship, but his soccer career didn't stop then. He played in the MISL and was recognized for his clutch performances. He received the Unsung Hero Award in the playoffs because he scored a game-tying goal for the St. Louis Steamers. Nice career for John Tima.
Absolutely, and I believe those St. Louis was a soccer hotbed in the United States.
It is. Now, if you get on the 5 and you go out, you can go to the Steamers, and then if you take the 17 over, you can go see Missouri, and then you just go anywhere.
Right. The 95.
95 will take you out another way. You betcha. You can just
19th hole.
19th hole. Thank God we're almost done. Mark.
I got Lawrence J. Roy. He writes, ranking Oklahoma ahead of Ohio State is beyond me. The Buckeyes have as much right to be ranked number 1 as anyone. Lawrence, no, they don't. They lost to UCLA in the Rose Bowl, and Oklahoma won. So no, they don't. They lost to a team in UCLA they beat earlier in the year, but they lost. And they lost in the last game. And you know why Lawrence feels this way? Where does he live? Oklahoma? No, he lives in Bridgeport, Ohio.
Ohio State has a long history of losing games they have no right losing.
This is true.
Bill.
This is from Leon T. Mewison. He's from Falls Church, Virginia. He says, Dan Jenkins wrote, the Vikings will see what pleases them in the films of the Staubach to Pearson touchdown pass. Leon says, I'm a Vikings fan, and when I looked at the films, I saw Drew Pearson push Nate Wright, and that didn't please me.
Oh.
I added the sound effect in my voice.
Yes.
I was trying to channel Leon.
You did a good job.
Yes, because he's not happy about this.
He really isn't. You know who else wasn't? Was Bruce DeHart from North Carolina. And he writes, I wish to take nothing away from a tremendous performance against the Minnesota Vikings by an excellent Dallas team, but 2 crucial calls went against the Vikes late in the fourth quarter. The catch by Drew Pearson on a 4th and 16th play appeared to be out of bounds, and Pearson's catch for the crucial touchdown came as he was pushing off on Nate Wright. I'm tired of watching games being won and lost by officials who blow calls. I think it's time Pete Rozelle did something about it. So we talked earlier in the magazine about how they were talking about a college playoff 50 years ago, and they were bitching about referees and officials 50 years ago as well. And there ain't nothing you can do about it. Humans are going to make mistakes. They're fallible. The officials, I hate when people go, they lost the game because the official. Yes, every once in a while that does happen, but more often
there are other plays in a game that lead to losing.
Correct.
You know, but even back in the Stone Age days, you know, they were probably pissed off when they did their rock throwing things, and you know, officials always take it in the ear.
Yep. Hey, that's a wrap. From sunburns and swimsuit issues to Wake Forest hoops in the ACC to college playoffs to Steve Kemp starting things off in Detroit. It's all part of the chaos we love. I'm Scott Johnston with Bill Mahoney and Mark Hoffman. Catch you next time on Mark, bring it home.
Pass our prime.
Woo!